The Boston Bruins kick off the unofficial second half of the NHL season tonight with a game against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Jeremy Swayman will get the start as Tuukka Rask will not practice at all this week. That's just one of the big questions facing the black and gold as we head towards the trade deadline and the playoffs. Going to take a look at some of those bigger questions today, as well as preview tonight's game against the Penguins here on the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast, your favorite team every single day.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B, as well as take a look around the NHL. Today is Tuesday, February 8th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins your first listen every day. The podcast is free and available on all platforms, as well as on YouTube, so please do smash that subscribe button. Each new episode will be automatically added to your feed for you to download, listen, and enjoy at your convenience. For those of you who may be new to the podcast, again, my name is Ian, lifelong Bruins fan since the Cam Neely, Ray Bourque days. I've been covering this team for about 17 years, writing for various outlets and independently. Worked for 5 years as a full-time hockey writer for The Score, and have been doing some freelance stuff ever since, including this podcast, which has been going strong since October of 2019. And after the All-Star break, the Boston Bruins back in action tonight against the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I'm sure you all have some questions about this team, how they will compete, what they're capable of, how far they can go. And a lot of that begins in net. And that's my biggest question for the Boston Bruins heading into the back half of the season is who will be the starter come playoff time? Is Tuukka Rask able to make an impact on this team? Can Jeremy Swayman or Linus Ullmark carry the load in the playoffs? Here's what we know right now. Tuukka Rask, he hasn't played since January 24th against the Anaheim Ducks. Did not practice on Monday. And Cassidy said he won't be practicing this week. So we'll update at the end of the week or early next week. Rask, of course, underwent off-season hip surgery. He went through a lengthy rehabilitation process. He's appeared in 4 games so far this season after signing a very modest 1-year deal with the team. He's gone 2-2 with a .844 save percentage, and played 2 pretty good games against Philadelphia and Winnipeg, and 2 not so good games against Carolina and Anaheim. Now, the idea with bringing Rask back is that they would give him some time to ramp things up, get back to full strength, and hopefully he would be kind of in mid-season form by the postseason. That was contingent on him kind of hitting the ground. Well, first of all, the initial plan was for him to get some games in the AHL so that he could kind of hit the ground running in the NHL. That was not possible because of COVID, an outbreak on the Providence side of things. And so he's had 4 games. Now he's been off for 2 weeks, and it's kind of going to be another soft reset if and when he is able to come back. So that's a big question mark for the Bruins. Do they continue to put him back in there if and when he becomes healthy, knowing that they have a bit of a playoff cushion here? They enter the second half of the season, well, the last 39 games of the season, with a wild card spot pretty well in hand. They have a record of 26, 14, and 3, 55 points, 9 points up on Detroit, with 4 games in hand on the Red Wings. They're also 4 points back of Washington for the first wildcard spot, with 4 games in hand on them. When it comes to the Atlantic Division, they're 8 points back of the Maple Leafs for third place in the Atlantic, with the same amount of games played. So it really looks right now that they are locked into a wild card spot, whether it's the first or the second. They do have, I don't want to say the luxury of putting Rask in there when he's healthy to give him some more runway to get up to full speed. But it's not a long runway, to be sure. And on the flip side, you want to make sure that if Ullmark and Swayman are the guys that need to be relied on, that they're getting the necessary reps as well. I did mention that Jeremy Swayman will get the first start since early January. Swayman said his time down in Providence was an opportunity to get better mentally, physically, work on his game. Didn't want it to be a negative thing at all. There was a lot of positives that came out of it, and he's happy to be back with the team, happy to be back with Ullmark, with whom he's developed a pretty special relationship, as evidenced by the hugs. And, he and Ullmark have played pretty well. Ullmark, it took him some time to get acclimated to the Bruins system, to get used to playing in Boston. New team, new city, new teammates. But he's played very well since kind of the beginning of December. Swayman carried the load to begin the season, and we know they can be an effective tandem, and they will be, in the years to come, with Ullmark signed for 3 more seasons after this one. So again, that for me is the biggest question for the Boston Bruins heading into the second half of the season. Can Rask make his comeback? Will they send Swayman back to the AHL? Will they carry 3 goalies for the time being? And who will be the number 1 option heading into the playoffs? That's going to be a big question for this Boston Bruins team. Now, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. I also want to talk for a moment about Primal Origin Oils. If you or someone you care about has a beard, it needs to get primal. Maybe you're the person who's never considered the benefits of treating your beard with product. Well, Primal Origin Oils will stop the itch and make your beard look healthy and groomed. Their products are free from harmful synthetic ingredients with low impact on the planet. They make balms, oils, whipped butter that are renowned as the best feel in beard products, all fair trade certified and handcrafted in the US of A. We know that every company claims to have the best, but Primal Origin Oils challenges you to compare their ingredients and the feel in beard to the other products you've used. We promise you'll see and feel the difference. Remember to use Locked On as the promo code to get 20% off at primaloriginoils.com. That's Locked On at checkout for 20% off. Thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day. Make sure to check out the Olympic Hockey Daily, presented by Locked On NHL, a bonus podcast covering all the action in Beijing. You can find it on the Locked On NHL podcast feed. It, too, is free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And today, of course, they'll be breaking down last night's thrilling game between Canada and the USA, which Canada prevailed, and I expect Canada to continue to prevail. Now, let's look at some other big questions facing the Boston Bruins. Another one being what's going to happen with Jake DeBrusk. It's been over 2 months now since he made his trade request public through his agent. He has yet to address the media since that time. There's some uncertainty as to whether he is sticking to it, whether he's rescinded it. He has played pretty well as of late on the new look third line. A big part of Boston's turnaround in the new year has been those revamped lines with some kind of combos working out for the Bruins. On the top line is Marchand and Bergeron, of course. Craig Smith has been up there. Oscar Steen's taken some twirls up there as well. On the second line, you have Hall and Pastrnak with Eric Haula playing primarily the center spot there. And then on the third line, you've had DeBrusk, Coyle, and then Steen on there as well. And they've been pretty effective trio as well. So will DeBrusk be traded? And if so, will it be for futures, for draft picks, for a prospect perhaps? Or will it be for someone who can come in and help right away? I've advocated all season long for Dylan Strome to be acquired from the Chicago Blackhawks. He was on the block, unhappy. That ship may have sailed as he has put up, I believe, like 11 points in 12 games this month. Similar contract to DeBrusk, a similar situation where there's a qualifying offer that would have to be met at the end of the season to retain his services. He could be a very good option as the number 2 center with Hall and Pastrnak. But again, perhaps it's best for the Bruins and for DeBrusk to kind of reconcile there and to make it work. But if he's sticking to the trade request, or if the Bruins say, you made this request, you don't want to be a Bruin, so no takebacks, you're out of here, that'll be a big, interesting question hanging over this team until the trade deadline on March 21st. And of course, another big question is whether or not Don Sweeney will make some big swings prior to the trade deadline. I mentioned Eric Haula had been playing on the second line and pretty well. He missed a couple games due to being in COVID-19 protocol. He's back. He's clear. He will be back on the second line tonight against the Penguins. But is he good enough in that role to carry a team deep into the playoffs? A lot of Boston's success in the postseason was built on that 1-2 punch of Bergeron and Krejci. Krejci no longer here. And is Haula that guy? He is pretty responsible defensively, not as offensively prolific. Do they want a guy who has more offensive upside in that spot? Do they want a guy who's defensively responsible to cover Hall and Pastrnak, who are defensively responsible in their own rights? They're not just offensive dynamos who don't back check. So that's a question on the front end. On the back end, you know, everybody keeps talking about needing help on the left side. It seems as though they're pretty committed to Grzelcyk, Riley, Forbort on the left side. With Vakanainen able to play there as well when healthy. He's still out with an upper body injury. Unfortunately, they lost Jakub Zboril. He was a very effective defenseman. For me, the big need is on the right side. You have McAvoy, who's playing elite hockey. Carlo, who's been kind of up and down, but generally solidish. And then Connor Clifton, who is a bit of a wild card in my estimation. And I'd really like to see them maybe upgrade at that position. So that's a big question. Right now, the defensive pairings would be Grizzly, McAvoy, Riley, Carlo, Forbort, Clifton. And we'll see how that works out tonight against a Pittsburgh Penguins team that I should add will be without Evgeny Malkin, as he is in COVID-19 protocols. But as of right now, that's pretty much the top six, barring further injury. And depending on how long Vakanainen is out, if he's back in, you could see a Forbort Vakanainen, which I don't mind. So we'll see how that shakes out. And then elsewhere, I'd like to see a scoring winger be brought in. Not sure if Craig Smith is able to hang on the top line for an extended period of time. So just some upgrades up front as well could be well in order for a team that's looking to go all in for this season. You don't know how many more times you have a crack at it with Bergeron in the mix. He's an unrestricted free agent, expected to be back, but who knows? We expected Krejci to be back, and he decided to go home. Not that Bergeron necessarily will go home to Quebec, heaven forbid, and play for the Montreal Canadiens. He's not from Montreal. He was a Nordiques fan growing up, thankfully. But you just never know. And Sweeney has some tools in the belt that he can build on or work with. There's Fabian Lysell, who could be dangled in the trade market. There's Boston's first-round pick. There's DeBrusk, as we mentioned, Jack Stanika, Urho Vakanainen. These all could be dangled to acquire some players of impact, whether it be looking at Vancouver, JT Miller, Connor Garland, Arizona, Jacob Chikrin, Phil Kessel, I'd still be into, I think, if Arizona retains some salary. Strome, I mentioned before. There's all kinds of possibilities out there. Claude Giroux, Joe Pavelski, Thomas Hertl. There's a lot of players out there who could potentially make pretty big impacts for the Boston Bruins. And the big question is, will Don Sweeney make a big swing? I think he will. And what will it cost the Bruins? How much of the future are they willing to give up in order to try to go for it this season, next season? Because a lot of the guys that they have in the mix right now are signed through next season. The guys that they signed this past summer, for example, Thomas Nosek signed through next season. Nick Foligno signed through next season. Haula, he is, signed a 2-year deal. So it really looked like their window was this season. Next season, then they would really evaluate where things are at and maybe retool, rebuild at that point after 2022, 2023. But, pretty much everybody is on the books through next season, except for Bergeron, UFA. DeBrusk is an RFA. Steen is an RFA. Lazar and Bleed are UFAs. And Vakanainen is an RFA. Zboro's an RFA as well. So are they going to commit to those guys? Would they be trade candidates? The core of this team is in place through this season and next season. So I would be shocked if Don Sweeney doesn't do everything he can to maximize their potential heading into the postseason and the trade deadline, which comes March 21st. So those are some of the big questions for me. The goaltending, the Jake DeBrusk situation, not to mention Zach Senyshyn's trade request, which is more of a minor league issue, I guess. And then what's going to happen at the trade deadline, how big is Sweeney willing to swing on March 21st or before? Now, BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Football, the big game is coming up on Sunday, and betonline.net is the best place for props, odds, and lines. They also have you covered for sports scores, news, even some podcasts. And it's just not football. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season at BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, Bruins are playing tonight, and could be a different looking lineup than what we've had before because the Bruins are relatively healthy, close to a full roster here with Erik Haula, like I mentioned, making his return to the second line. Both Nick Foligno and Trent Frederick are also healthy as well. And head coach Bruce Cassidy said they both should be available for tonight's game if they come in Tuesday morning for the morning skate and feel good. Whether they're cleared to play and where they fit in the lineup remains to be seen. Vakanainen, I mentioned, was injured in the game against Seattle. Didn't practice Monday. He left the game, had some facial repairs, Cassidy said. So that's where he's at. Not playing tonight, but we'll see how he progresses. When it came to the lines yesterday, it looked as though Trent Frederick was the odd man out when it came to the line rushes in practice. We had Marchand, Bergeron, Smith, Hall, Pasternak, DeBrusk, Coyle, Steen, and then Foligno rotating with Anton Bleed on the fourth line with Nosek and Lazar at center and right wing, respectively. Trent Frederick looked like the odd man out. So if both Foligno are going to get in on the action, then Bleed would have to come out, and take your pick on who else comes out. Steen, I don't think he should be coming out. DeBrusk, not really. Nosek, Lazar, they've played pretty well. One of the things with this team, going back to the questions, is they are pretty deep when it comes to bottom six talent. Arguably the sure thing top six wingers on this team. They have four of them: Marchand, Bergeron, Hall, Pasternak, Smith, Haula, arguably bottom six guys, maybe second line guys. So the Bruins have a lot of options when it comes to the bottom six, not as much at the top of the lineup. And that is certainly an issue that needs to be addressed. But again, Jeremy Swayman getting the start tonight, and we'll see here in the morning skate how things are going to shake out in terms of lines and things like that. But I would imagine that Frederick would be the odd man out, and perhaps Foligno would be in net. There were a couple games last night. I mentioned earlier that the Toronto Maple Leafs, there's a big gap between them and the Bruins in the standings. One factor that could help those two come together is Austin Matthews suffered an injury with 40 seconds remaining in the third period. He was hit in the head by a Brett Pesce knee while falling back into the boards. He remained on the ice for several minutes, and skated off on his own power. But if he were to miss any length of time, then that could narrow the gap between the Bruins and the Maple Leafs in the standings. On the flip side, Mitch Marner is red hot for the for the Maple Leafs. I believe he's scored in 8 straight games with 9 goals or something like that. So they certainly have talent to remain, a top 3 team in the Atlantic Division. Anyways, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to Locked On Boston Bruins. Again, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe now if you haven't already on the YouTube page, on your favorite podcast app. And we'll be back tomorrow to take a look at the results from tonight's game and maybe answer some mailbag questions if any are in today. And just keep things going here on the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. Again, thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate it. Hope you're having a good week, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Take care, friends.